Some of the best memories from my younger days were made beside smoky grills and calm waters, the scent of charcoal lingering in the summer air, kids' laughter echoing in the distance, and neighbors chatting over potato salad like they'd been friends forever. It was the kind of atmosphere where community still meant something, where people looked out for one another instead of fighting over mailbox paint or the exact height of hedges. That's the feeling I had in mind when I planned the barbecue. What I didn't expect was that the evening would end with 3 police cruisers rolling up my driveway, lights flashing, and a clipboard-wielding tyrant about to receive a lesson she would never forget. Through the haze of hickory smoke, I saw the officers step out of their cars, faces wearing that careful mask of authority. The cheerful hum of our pond-side gathering died instantly. Plates sat half-filled, cups froze mid-air, and children instinctively pressed closer to their parents. But me? I didn't flinch. I simply reached for the folder I'd kept on the picnic table for the last 3 weeks, waiting for this exact moment. 9 minutes. That's all it took to unravel Karen Thornberry's stranglehold on our neighborhood. 9 minutes to watch her self-assured glare twist into disbelief, then panic, and finally melt into a stunned silence I'll never forget. But to understand what really happened that day, you have to know the story behind it. The story of how one woman's arrogance collided with a piece of land that carried more history than she could ever comprehend. My name is David Parsons. 15 years ago, I inherited 40 acres of land from my grandfather. It was the same stretch I'd visited as a boy, where I helped him mend fences, skipped rocks across the pond, and listened to his tales about how his own grandfather had bought the property way back in 1892. That 3-acre pond in the middle had been in our family for 4 generations. When I built my home on the eastern edge, I made a conscious choice to preserve the rest, keeping it wild, quiet, and open for any neighbors who respected it. For years, that balance worked just fine. But then came the expansion. Oak Ridge Estates grew larger, and with it came the creeping shadow of bureaucracy. Somewhere along the way, whether through sloppy paperwork or deliberate overreach, the HOA claimed jurisdiction over land that wasn't theirs. At first, I didn't even notice. I was neck-deep in consulting work, barely skimming their newsletters. I had never signed any of their agreements, never paid dues, never thought twice about challenging their authority. That is, until Karen Thornberry became HOA president. Karen had moved in 3 years earlier from somewhere up north, and she carried herself as if she'd been crowned the neighborhood's self-appointed sheriff. Barely 5'2", she somehow walked as if she cast a shadow twice her size. Her lips were always pursed, her clipboard never far from reach. What started as minor policy tweaks soon turned into a full-blown crusade. Lawn citations, paint, code violations, even complaints about wind chimes being auditory disturbances. And then she came after my pond. I'll never forget that day. I was teaching my nephew how to bait a hook when she stomped across the shoreline, her designer, heels sinking into the mud, waving a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws. She announced that I needed a permit to fish and that the pond had to be registered with her committee. I calmly told her it was private property. She sniffed and shot back. Everything inside Oak Ridge Estates falls under our governance. That night, I opened up my grandfather's old boxes. What I found inside was a treasure trove: deeds, tax records, survey maps stretching back more than a century. Not only did I own every inch of that pond and the surrounding land, but the HOA had unknowingly been using about 2 acres of my property for their walking path, without permission or payment. I took it all to my friend James Morrison, an attorney, who confirmed what I suspected. The HOA had 0 claim. James gave me advice I'll never forget. "Let them keep digging," he said. "Document everything. They'll bury themselves." So I did just that. For 6 months, I recorded every trespass, every threatening letter, every time Karen stood at my property line waving her phone around like it was some kind of badge. Then, 3 weeks ago, the HOA sent a formal notice threatening legal action if I didn't comply with their rules. That's when I decided to host a Memorial Day barbecue. Hand-delivered invitations to 30 longtime neighbors. Not through HOA channels, directly, the old-fashioned way. 5 families RSVP'd, excited for a chance to relax like we used to. I hired a barbecue truck, set up folding tables and chairs, even brought in a sound system. Nothing extravagant. Everything was fully within county ordinances and perfectly legal. The afternoon unfolded exactly as I hoped. Kids splashed in the shallows of the pond, adults sipped sweet tea and swapped stories. Laughter carried over the water. For a few hours, our neighborhood felt like it had rolled back in time, before citations, before fines, before rules about mailbox paint and lawn lengths. And then came Hurricane Karen. She stormed in red-faced, clutching her ever-present clipboard like it was a permanent extension of her arm. She barked about unauthorized gatherings, insisting we'd broken 17 separate HOA rules. I just smiled and offered her a burger. That was the breaking point. She whipped out her phone and loudly declared she was calling the police. She announced to anyone within earshot that she was reporting us for noise violations, unpermitted food vendors, and illegal gatherings. Then she planted herself rigidly at what she thought was the HOA's property line, arms folded like a mall cop guarding a storefront, yelling threats at anyone who dared meet her gaze. I told my guests not to worry and stepped inside to grab my folder. When the police arrived, I greeted them calmly, spatula in one hand, folder in the other. The lead officer, Sergeant Wallace, recognized me right away. We'd met at a community fundraiser years earlier. I handed him the documents, original deeds, survey maps, and a cease and desist letter James, my attorney friend, had prepared. Meanwhile, Karen was giving her statement at full volume, her voice carrying across the yard like a bullhorn. It didn't take long before I saw Sergeant Wallace's expression shift as he flipped through the papers. He motioned over another officer, and together they compared my survey with county records. Then Wallace walked over to Karen. From across the lawn, I watched the color drain from her face as he calmly explained that not only was this land private, but the HOA had been trespassing on it for over a decade. Then Sergeant Wallace came back to me and in a quieter tone asked if I wanted to press charges. I declined, but I did request that he witness the delivery of the cease and desist letter. Karen tried to argue, but Officer Bennett stepped between us before she could push further. And then, right there in front of everyone, Sergeant Wallace read aloud portions of the letter. It ordered the HOA to stop claiming jurisdiction over my property, remove their signage, and cease all communication regarding enforcement. It also addressed the walking path and our intent to seek damages if they continued using it without a proper agreement. Karen's face turned pale. She shrieked about lawsuits, threatened bankruptcy, demanded to speak to higher authorities. The officers, unimpressed, warned her to leave before her false police report earned her a citation. And just like that, the barbecue resumed. And let me tell you, the mood changed instantly. My neighbor Tom, the same man who once got fined $300 for a non-compliant mailbox, actually teared up. The music seemed sweeter, the laughter louder. Kids jumped back into the pond, splashing like they hadn't in months. 3. Days later, I received a letter from the HOA's attorney disputing the property lines. James fired back with a full package: documents, tax history, a decade of land use evaluation, photographs, transcripts. The dispute was withdrawn within 48 hours. The emergency HOA meeting that followed? A circus. I didn't attend. I wasn't a member, but Tom filled me in. Karen tried to spin everything as her noble attempt to protect community standards. But when the treasurer revealed that pursuing legal action could cost the association over $200,000 in fees and damages, the room erupted. A vote of no confidence was called. It passed, 38-2. Karen stood up, red-faced and sputtering, threatening everyone in the room. but the board president simply reminded her that the meeting was being recorded. She sat down in silence. The real ending came later. Someone, honestly, I don't know who, sent footage of her behavior to her employer, a regional bank. Within days, she was placed on leave. And then came the final blow. The county sheriff officially charged her with misuse of emergency services, a misdemeanor carrying a $5,000 penalty. She was served the summons in her HOA president's parking spot. According to Tom, she sat in her car for 20 minutes just staring at the paper. No shouting, no clipboard, no threats. Just a woman who finally realized that real authority doesn't come from rules on a page. It comes from respect. And sometimes the land remembers exactly who it belongs to. So, if you enjoyed seeing a clipboard finally get served its last notice, don't forget to like this video. It helps more folks discover these stories. And if you've ever locked horns with an HOA or just enjoy a good old-fashioned victory for the little guy, subscribe. For more tales where common sense and property lines finally come out on top.